evening, New Light family and friends. This is our first virtual Sunday school lesson since the pandemic. And we don't know exactly how it's going to go, but we're going to do our best with the Lord's help. First, we're going to have a word of prayer.
Our Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for how you have blessed and kept us. Our Father, we pray that you continue to bless and keep us, and Lord, help us to learn how to trust in you. These are our blessings we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
And today's lesson is coming from the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel. What is it? Chapter 19. Saul's attempt on David's life. 1 Samuel chapter 19, verses 8 through 17.
In this lesson, we have three topics. The first one is danger of a jealous king. The second one is deliverance through a window. And the third one is deception of a loving wife. Now, this lesson is about around the time of 1021 BC, which is before Christ, years ago. But as you're reading through this, you'll see how jealousy is still prevalent in today's life. Now, it says in today's aim, there's three things that want us to think about. Right? The facts. And the facts is for us to understand that jealous people are also unhappy and angry people. And we see a lot of what? Anger, don't we? Today. It's nothing new. The principle is to see that jealousy is a destructive fire that always seeks satisfaction, but never finds it. Okay? That's the principle. Now, the application, in other words, as we're studying these lessons, we are to what? Apply them to our lives, right? And the application is to be content with what God has given us and to trust Him for the things we need in the future. Okay? So let's go to our first outline. And this story is about, most of us are familiar with King David, and we heard a lot about King Saul. Okay, but at this time, David was not the king. He was not in place as the king. God had called him to be, but he hadn't placed him in that position yet. Okay, 1 Samuel chapter 19, verses 8, 9, and 10 reads as thus. And there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines and slew them with a great slaughter. And they fled from him. Verse 9, and the evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul, as he sat in his house with his javelin in his hand. And David played with his hand. Verse 10, and Saul sought to smite David, even to the wall with the javelin. But he slipped away out of Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin into the wall. And David fled and escaped that night. Okay, so there's some things that happened prior to this. David had went out in a battle, he and the King Saul, and they had slew their enemy. And when they came back to town, there were some ladies that were singing. And they said, Saul killed his thousands, but David killed his 10,000. And that's where the jealousy started. And so that gives you a little background as to what caused this. Now, David was serving the king. I mean, he was doing everything that the king asked him. And the only thing that kept this was what? When it seemed like David was getting more praise than the king. So that tells us something, that sometimes we can be praising people and we can cause somebody else to get what? Jealous, right? Okay? And so that's what it says, the danger of a jealous king. So here, David would go in because Saul, the spirit had left him because he was disobedient to God. And so he was having these evil spirits, and David would go in and play his harp for him to calm him down. And when he was in there this time, the king threw his javelin and he was trying to nail him to the wall to kill him because of what? He heard the women singing, Saul killed his thousands, David killed 10,000. Okay? And that's where the jealousy began.
In studying this lesson, I looked up the word jealousy. And there are so many other words that are similar to jealousy. And I came up with this. See, envious breeds bitterness. So Saul became bitter. Bitterness, jealousy, selfishness, ambitions, resentment, slander, deceit. There are so many words in our English language that can be used. So when we think about envy, we can think of the bitterness. We all know people who are bitter. There are some people who are just plain old. Nothing you can do can satisfy them. They, as you said earlier, that they are angry, unhappy people.
Yeah.
And so naturally, Saul became unhappy. He was king.
Yeah.
And they chose God, the Israelites requested a king, God gave them Saul, and so Saul was good at first, but he because of his disobedience, he lost the favor of God. And when you lose God's favor, when you have a choice, to stop, regroup, and realize that, David really hadn't done anything to me. This person really has not done anything to me, and so, or either you can yield to your, your anger, your bitterness.
All right. We'll go to our next topic.
Oh, excuse me, let me just add one more thing.
Okay.
I did read Galatians, the 6th chapter, 4th verse. It did say, let everyone examine his own work, and then he can take pride in himself, okay, and not compare himself with someone else. So Saul should have taken pride in his 1,000 because David was actually working for him. And so he should have, should not have been jealous of David's 10,000. Okay.
And the bottom line, they both should have been working for God.
Yes.
And then the concern should be, is God pleased with what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, the next one is deliverance through a window. So we see that King Saul he's out to destroy David because he thinks David wants to get his kingship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, but God is what? Allowing a way for him to escape. If God calls us to do something, he's got the way prepared. We just have to learn how to trust him, right? And so listen what happens here. It says deliverance through a window, okay? It's in verse 11 and 12. Saul also sent messengers unto David's house to watch him and to slay him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if thou save not thy life tonight, tomorrow thou shalt be slain. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. Okay, so David's, what we have to remember is David's wife is King Saul's daughter. Okay, all right. And so we see how God is working this thing. Okay, his wife hides him, tells him, you better get up out of here, because she knew her dad was after him. She didn't know what was going on, but she knew it was after him. And so David, adhered to what she told him. So it says that he escaped out of the window because the guards was out there watching the house. All right? Okay, so deliverance is what? Trusting God to deliver us from whatever it is that if we get into something that he's called us to do, then he'll deliver us from. We may not like the way he delivers us, but he will deliver. As we close, we'd like to leave you with this thought from the author. It says, jealousy is a fire that consumes everything in its path. Jealousy.
And I just want to say too that there's a scripture that says, no weapon formed against me shall prosper.